Oh, okay, this went down or
Either
this way?
Down or right, either way.
Okay, great.
Let's get
Well, how's
this-
everybody doing? Everybody full and, lunch, and now you have, you can sleep through mine. Good idea, good idea. Mine are not the most exciting of things that we all get to be involved with. You think there are?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about custody evaluations. How many people know about custody evaluations? And you've seen them. You've been involved with them. Okay, so I'm going to try to go over and give you a little background of what it should be like, so that you can compare whatever you get by somebody else, what it should be. So let's start talking about it. Is that we look at the concept of mental illness in the United States. And as you can see by this chart here, that it's pretty prevalent. Over 30 million people, are suffering from, like just eating disorders. You got another 17, almost 18 million suffering from depression. Substance abuse is, 14.5 million people. We got lots of people that are having challenges, right? And some of those are going to end up in our court system. So, when you think about a 730 evaluation and it being asked for to be in the court, who does it benefit? Now, you all are attorneys, so you probably have. And we have one judge. Is that the courts are really overburdened, aren't they? I mean, I'm preaching to the choir with that one, right? Mm-hmm. So is that the judge doesn't have time to read the 400 pages that everybody submitted in the case, right? Anybody notice that kind of happens? When I'm talking to the litigants, they go, "Yeah, I don't know what happened. They didn't read anything I put in, And so what I explained to them is that part of what this evaluation is to do is to give people that ability to get their time in the court through me, so that the court will get to see what it is. Because I'm going to end up at the end of all this, I'm going to write a report that will give the judge the ability to synthesize all of the information, or the majority of the information that's there, in a concise way, so that they can then look at it and see what they might need to do with this family and outline what I think needs to be done. So when you think about the family benefits and the fact that now they finally get to be heard, right? Because everybody wants to be heard, right? They never listen to me, right? And then after a while, they're even complaining that minors' counsel or their attorneys don't listen to them, and their mother doesn't listen to them anymore, or whatever, right? So I think that's kind of what happens. My belief is that it shows the judge what's going on with the family, and as Diana was so nicely saying, is I'm drilling down to find out what are the causes of things and how those really are affecting their ability to be a parent. Okay, so I explained to everybody that nothing personal, but I'm not here for you parents. I'm here for the kids, and that's the only people I care about. And so that's what I'm going to be doing. So that's what I feel is sort of my ethical duty, to be able to do that, to figure out what's in the best interest of the kids. So when we get to there's a lot of models of standards and all that, and kind of how these are supposed to be done. When people do not do the things appropriately, then what you can have is not only a 730 evaluation, you can then have a 733 evaluation. The 733 evaluation is in the evaluation of the evaluator. Did the evaluator follow the models of standards that they should be using to come up with the report? Okay, in my briefcase, I have a case that I'm doing a 733 on. This person that does these evaluations is highly noted as an evaluator. Unfortunately, this person really doesn't know what they're doing, but they're in the in circle. They're in the Beverly Hills crew, okay? And she's an MD. So she really doesn't understand psychological testing. Yeah, she's a psychiatrist. But she doesn't understand psychological testing. So what does she do is that she administers a psychological test to people, and then she sends them up on Pearson, because we all go up to the Pearson website and as a score your test, right? And it gives you a cursory interpretation, a very general interpretation. So she copies and pastes that in her reports. Now, if she was reading, she would have read that what it states in that printout she gets. Do not copy and paste this. This is only for to give you more information. It needs to be analyzed and interpreted by qualified people. So,
Don't mean to interrupt, because I've had this in cases in the past.
mm-hmm.
MMPIs, for example, there's a way that they're self-scored versus.
Well, it used to be self-scored. I mean, years ago, a couple hundred years ago, when I started doing this stuff, we used to have, a little cardboard, not cardboard, but,
Like the multiple choice thing.
yeah, little templates that we used to use over. We count all the scores, and then you would enter that into your little thing, and you'd come up with what the scores were. Those days have long gone because that takes way too much time to do. With 30 templates that you got to put over things and try to figure out what the score is. So nowadays, what you do is that you enter it into the computer prints out, spits out you a result.
So that's not, that result is not generated by you, it's by the computer with what you just inputted.
Okay, it is generated by, right, it's correct. But it's only the beginning part. That is not the end result. So now what you have to do is that because, as we talk about the MMPI for a second, is that there's multiple scales within the test, okay? The misnomer is that the L scale stands for the lie scale. It doesn't stand for lie scale, but folklore says it stands for the lie scale. It's the scale of defensiveness. Now, when you think about it, is that do you think if you have people that are involved in a high conflict custody case, they might be a little defensive? I can guarantee you they are. It's a good friend of mine who, just a little history of it is that when in Los Angeles County, when they decided, they came up with a panel that was actually worked in the courthouse, they had their own office in the courthouse. They had like 15 different guys doing it, and my friend was the one that ended up being the one that did all the testing for everybody. So he has thousands of MMPIs, all done with litigants. So we can look at how do they score differently than the general population. And so those are important scores. Okay, so now when I do mine, if you read my reports, when it gets to the MMPI, it talks about that I'm using the Southern California norms for what it is. So now when you have the norms, you can now look at what do those scales mean. Okay, so that L scale is going to be high. People who don't know what it means are going to think, well, this person just lying. Well, it's not what the test is about, that part. So you have to look at all the different scores. And then when you look at all the different scores, then it starts to kind of plot out what type of thing you have. And then from there, you can make out what may be going on with the person. And there's dozens and dozens of books that kind of explain all of the different kinds of parts of it. So I'm pull something from this book, I'll pull something from this research article, and then I can have an idea of what that person's like. I'm looking, though, not to diagnose somebody. I'm looking to come up with is there something going on that makes them impossible for them to co-parent? My goal is to have them co-parenting, not to come up with some cute label and give them a DSM-5 label. That won't do us any good, will it? Oh, look at me, I have a label. I'm a narcissist. Well, everybody else knows you're a narcissist. Why do I need to tell you? Okay, so when we look at all of the different the different types of things, then we can start talking about some, biasing. Early, and biasing, we all have it. How many people heard when you were? I don't want to get into your talk, but I'm going to go over a little bit of it. How many people heard that? It's when I was growing up, there was 3 stories to every conflict, right? There was that person, and what happened with the truth of what happened, right? Well, that could be a bias, right? So now you're trying to do an evaluation, and you're looking at, okay, well, what if this one person really is telling you the truth, but you believe this? Earlier when you were talking about, I said that I don't have people that are that stupid that, are faking it, right? And that's a bias of mine because, see, I get to see a very skewed population. I don't see people who function normally on a regular basis. That's just nice they let me out every once in a while. But most of the people that I see tend to have, they're locked into a battle and they don't have any kind of concept of what's going on. So you can have a gender bias. I remember when I first started my practice and I was talking to different attorneys, and I go, oh, well, I have a selection of evaluators. If I have my client is a female, then I use this one or this one evaluator because they always go for what the female is. Or if I need someone that's for a male, I got these group over here. And I go, I don't do that. I give you whoever is the right person. I'm not one way or the other. So you can have a gender bias. There's certain people that I don't know necessarily that they were thinking that I need to just do it this way, but that's what they ended up doing. Or maybe it's a cultural bias. Maybe you think that somebody from a certain culture has certain characteristics, right? And so now when you're doing an evaluation, what comes up when you're thinking about it? That group is, they're not real bright, they're this, they're that, maybe they're lazy, they're this, they tend to do this, they tend to do that. Now you're starting to kind of guide your evaluation down that road. Or how about you maybe have the primacy effect or the recency effect. Whatever is the latest that you heard is what you start thinking about, right? And then what happens is that we have this unique ability as humans. Anybody here ever bought a new car? And how many times did you then all of a sudden see that new car on the road?
All the time.
Is it always there now? I bought this Mercedes and I never saw them before. Now they're everywhere. Right? Well, that's part of that is it's called as a confirmatory bias. Because see, now you filter out the ones you don't want to see mentally, right? And you only see those, right? But you don't know you filtered out the other ones, right? Because there's a book. It's called The Ant, the Elephant. The ant is your conscious mind, but the elephant is your subconscious mind. The elephant sees things in visions and pictures, where your conscious mind hears it in just verbiage. So now your subconscious mind, the elephant is just here seeing. Oh, you got a red Mercedes. All I said, how come they're all out there like that? I never saw one before, right? That's a confirmatory bias. And so what happens? You start cherry picking data. Anybody seen that in a report before? A few times? Okay. And what happens is it becomes somewhat of an unconscious effect that occurs, is that now you believe X, and so the only thing you start seeing is X, and what relates to that X. You don't see the Y, or maybe I should use a letter A instead. You don't see that, right? And then we can get along to people can have I touched that cable again. Sorry. You can have religious biases or biases influenced by your own divorce. Cognitive biases. You can believe that certain people, certain degrees, or certain this have certain characteristics. And what do you do then? You start applying that confirmatory bias, right? And all of a sudden, that's all you see. They all have red Mercedes, right? Okay, then we start seeing stereotype stuff that can happen. You can see, and once it becomes anchored, then all you see is red Mercedes. You'll think that that's all that exists, right? They don't make them in any other color. So we can start thinking the truth lies somewhere in the middle. We have a saying in family law is that Attila the Hun doesn't marry Mother Teresa, right? So if you start believing that, now you start thinking that you start discounting what other people are saying, right? So now, or you have people that are for the moves or people that are against the move without even looking at the data, right? So people have research biases. There's all kinds of biases that Dale's going to go over in a little while. So what's in the best interest of a child? You are going over there, right?
Well, that's only recording that they'll watch next weekend.
Next weekend, okay.
That's okay.
So when you start thinking about what's in the best interest of the child, the state of California has helped us understand what the best interest of the child is, right? They've outlined several things that you kind of have to look at. So you can look at the definitions of what that is when you're trying to figure it out. Now, when you're looking to put together a report, a couple things that you have to remember is that, and when I do 733s, this is what you see is the biggest challenge, is that you have to have multiple streams of data, right? So the tests that I do, there's some redundancy that overlap between the tests. So that if I find something that's really strange in one test, but it's not showing up over in the other test that somewhat relates to that, then that's sort of an thing that's happening here. This may not be really, it could be a false positive that I'm seeing here. But if it's overlapping and I'm seeing it in multiple tests, now I'm getting more confirmatory than of what I actually have here, right? So that's why you need to have multiple streams of data. If you have one stream of data, one of the common ones is you have a he said, she said argument.
That's code 473, right?
Uh-huh. And as therapists, they see that he said, she said thing, and they're like a referee in a tennis match, going back and forth, right? And they feel that way sometimes. I mean, I did that for a long time. I praise you guys. I don't want to treat anymore. I haven't done that in a long time. I'm just going to do evaluations. So you have to start looking at this is trying to use different things. So that's why psychological testing becomes important. That's why the collaterals become important. That's why the data that you've got from all of the records becomes important. And then also the clinical interviews of these people. When I'm doing a clinical interview and I start with it and I explain to them all of the rules and regulations that we're going by and all that kind of stuff, and we get through that, I get them to understand that that's kind of what we're doing. I'm going to give them as much time as they feel they need to tell their side of the story. I say a dumb joke, and that is, you probably noticed when this was all going on, I wasn't sleeping in the spare bedroom. I wasn't there. So now I need to see it through your eyes. And so once I tell them that, then I have one case now that I think I've got like 20 hours of time into getting the story, because they want to give me very incremental data that may not have any basis of anything. But I'm going to give them their time because they're paying me for it. I might as well get the story as best as accurate as I can. So what I try to do in my evaluations is I outline how did they get started, when did they first find each other, and then what happened to where we got to today. Now sometimes that takes 20 pages in a report. That's why at the beginning of my reports I tell the reader that if you really want to just skip to the punchline here is where the summary and conclusion is, and these are the page numbers, go read that, then you can come back and read the rest.
And on behalf of the bench officers, yes, yay.
That's why I just put my recommendations and summaries.
That's what I always ask. That way I know how to read the rest of it. I'm not going through it all trying to figure out where is this going.
Where is that leading?
Yeah.
But I got a board complaint one time for doing that.
Really?
Yeah, someone tried. I mean, the board was like, nah. But because I put my recs and the summary and all of that together, they said I had biased, and it actually was a report that I'd written for you. But they said I had biased the reader by giving.
As though none of us have ever gotten a letter in the mail, turned to the very end to see where the signature is to find out who wrote it.
Uh-huh.
That's what we all do. We go to the end to see what the conclusion is, then go back and read it.
But I think you bring up a good point is that the board and how they view things is not the way the world works.
Exactly. And it's not for us.
No, they're not our friends.
No.
Okay. So I write mine from this way so that I don't get that board complaint. And to me, it's a logical flow of how we got there. From there, after going through and having all that interview, and this is the situation, he said this, she said that, and that's all it is, a he said, she said. So I go through with each one of them, and so I try to tie the story together so it sort of makes sense and is chronologically there. Is then I go into analyzing each one of the parents or each one of the litigants here to find out, well, what is their individual background? How did they get where they are? You know, what was their family like? So we're looking at those cultural issues that we were talking about earlier, right? And so from there, then we start, you know, I want them to be heard, the weaknesses. Then we go, from there we go into the sort of the psychological and emotional functioning of what's going on. So that comes into the psychological testing issue. So I'm biased from my training, right? As you were referring to, well, in graduate school, I learned this, right? So in graduate school, when I was learning psychological testing, I learned to do it a certain way. Now, there's a couple different theories of testing. One testing is you do the same sort of model to everybody. Then you can look at where the differences occur. Others look at, I'm going to be subjective and use different tests for different people. And I don't, you know, I mean, there's people trained in that. It doesn't fit well for me because I wasn't trained to do it that way. When I used to do neuropsychological assessments, that's what you did. You were looking to find a deficit and then explore that deficit to as far as you could to see what they were doing. But in psychological testing, I'm not looking for their deficits. I'm looking to see what's interfering with their ability to co-parent. That's the sort of goal. I mean, coming up with a long thesis of their psychological functioning probably is not beneficial, and it's just going to bore the judge to death. You know, they're going to skip over that page completely. And I'm also looking at how the other part of my testing is that it gives me an idea of their emotional functioning. And so I'm also talking about how do they emotionally function. Well, they think that their thinking is the best it's ever been. How can you think that in the middle of a high conflict divorce? Right? That doesn't make sense, does it? My judgment is as good as it's ever been. That's why you're fighting with this person for the last 4 years. So you start looking at how they're starting to maybe some of those things start to unravel a little bit. You look at how, well, if they're thinking that, then what do I need to do to help them be able to see that maybe their thinking has some flaws in it? So that's where I'm referring them to Diana or Carol to go get treatment, go get some help and learn how to deal with things differently. Then after we've gone through several of the interviews, then I start into asking them questions about where I see the gaps in what they've talked about. Well, your ex is saying that this kind of occurred before that. And so now I'm starting to try to hold their feet a little bit to the fire. Okay? And I do it kind of gently in the beginning, and then I become a little bit at the end, I become a lot more forceful about it. And then I talk about, well, what do your children need? And you'd be surprised how many, well, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, you must have all been dealing, that how many people have a tough time figuring out what their children need in this. Right? One is doing minors counsel work for a long time, they forgot that person, right?
I'm not sure that yes, they've forgotten them, and then they can't think like that anymore.
No, yeah. So I'm trying to get them to think a little bit about that, you know, and I'll ask them questions, and sometimes to see that question mark that shows up on their face is very telling. And then it comes into it says, well, what do you believe? Anybody ever sat there looking at a case going, scratching your head, wondering, what do you believe in it? And so that's when you start looking at some more of the data, right? You start looking at, well, you get the collateral information. Now, if I'm going to interview collaterals, you know, people will give me, there's one case that I'm finishing up now that, you know, I've got 30 collaterals that they want me to interview. Now, they have plenty of money, so that's not really an issue, but it bores the heck out of me. You know, I don't really want to interview 30 people. So what am I going to get from people when I'm interviewing the collaterals? Well, family and friends, what do typically your family and friends are going to say that you put down on a piece of paper to tell somebody to call as a character witness? They're going to say what a great person you are. That, you know, you can't believe that God only made one of you. You know? The only
My son.
exactly. The only time that I think that those collaterals are important is when they start telling you things that don't go along with that program. When they start telling you, well, you know, my daughter's had problems for a long time. Really? I learned a cute little word. It's oh really, how's that? And you can use that and answer all kinds. Oh really? Oh really? How's that? Okay. And so in that, what I'm doing is I want to find out, well, okay, I'm going to now be a very active listener and try to figure out, well, what is it about your child, that now they're still, showing those same things, 30 years later or 20 years later, whatever. And so those are going to be important information in what you're doing. When I've got one that's telling me that they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, yeah, okay. Hey, I really appreciate the conversation. You have a terrific day. It's going to not be that long of a conversation with them. Now, what I do want to look at is some of the professionals that are involved, which brings up is why I really love referring to Diana and Carol is because I don't have this problem with them. In other districts, I have this problem is that I get therapists who are activists. They decided they are an activist. They have to, jump up and down all about what their client is. And they want to be involved and tell me about how the custody should be and how, this person beat them and did all this other kind of stuff. And all this stuff that is just parroting what they were told by their client. And then they want to be involved in the legal process. Well, because they have this overzealousness. An attorney friend of mine and I are doing a dog and pony show to some of the study groups in Southern California about activist therapists who become activists, and that a therapist can have many roles involved in a legal situation. They can be the treaters. And nothing's wrong with that. But if you decide to be a treater and then you become an activist, and you're going to make custody recommendations based on the fact you've never even talked to the other person, or you saw them once in your waiting room, yeah, we may have some problems. Okay? I was involved in a case, all those players are out of here, so that the treating therapist wanted to criticize my evaluation because she knew best. And so, the reason I brought up the statement about the L scale is that her thing was that the L scale indicated that the other parent was a liar, which translates, if you're trying to say you know how to interpret an MMPI and you're calling it an L scale, well, that's a civilian thing, somebody who does no clue what it is.
What was her title?
She was the treating therapist of the mother.
I know, but MFT.
No, she's a PhD. She's a psychologist, but she doesn't do her own testing. And then,
This is the one you're doing the 733 on.
no, this is one. No, this is not that one. This is another one. This one I did a 730 on, and. I won't go into too much detail, but she wanted to become an activist. So I was very willing to let her attempt to do that, because my personal attorney for my malpractice and I were setting the trap. As soon as you do that and you step on the stage to do that, we'll make the complaint to the board, because you'll lose your license for doing that program. Okay? So, back to what we're supposed to be talking about. In the testing stuff, we're going to look at is I want back to talking about that, trying to make it so that it all kind of fits together. Psychological, there's no test that measures parenting. There lots of people have come up with different tests that want to say that it's measuring, how you can parent, but that doesn't make sense, does it? But there was a guy in New York who came up with Bricklin, who came up with all these different tests, and he had statistics and all that. I remember my first book in statistics was How to Lie with Statistics. And in there he had great, look good, unless you really kind of dug down and understood what the statistics mean. But most people look at the statistics and just take it at face value, right? Because it's like, well, that's way more math than I want to deal with. At least that's what I would say, you know. So I'm on a group chat with all of the top evaluators in I think in the world at this point, at least the country. And we were talking about this guy's tests, and everybody says, yeah, we all have them. I don't know where I have them in my office, but I know that I have them. They're still in a file somewhere that nobody uses, right? So the reality is that what we try to do is take the psychological testing and look at how can somebody co-parent? How can they measure up to being, helping this child become a high-functioning person? Okay, and so that's what really what the testing is supposed to be doing. So when we look at that, we try to figure out, take the test and look at how does it been for the tens of thousands, if not millions of people that have you taken the test. I mean, there's a lot of people who've gotten divorces, right? So we're just looking to provide some insight to what's going on. Now, part of what I do also is that in that, my printouts talk about is that what are some of the abnormal answers that you get on the test. So I'm looking at what the abnormal answers are, and then so that gives me more things to ask them about. Oh, it said you answered that you believe that people will take whatever they want. You don't trust anybody. Is that right? Oh, I said that? And so now I get more information from them about what it is. Or they said, that sometimes I just feel so bad that I don't care if I live or not. But they won't tell you that they're depressed. But they'll answer that on a test. So that gives me more information to talk to them about. Yes?
I had a couple of people who were testing for jobs, I think, with the police department. I'm not sure. I don't remember. This is years ago. They said they were asked, do you hate your mother, on one of the questions, and something about headaches. How often? I don't remember what it was. And they were told they flunked the test because they said they never got headaches or something. I can't remember. Are those kind of questions something that you seriously might look into for an abnormal answer?
Well, in my world, it's interesting you bring up they were going to police. My supervisor, when I worked for the Department of Mental Health, he had enough of working for the Department of Mental Health because he transferred. We originally started in Skid Row, and then he was tired of working at Skid Row in downtown LA. Left me there, and he went off to the jails. And after being at the jails for a while, he was, I'm retiring. And so what he did was the psychological testing for the police department, the LAPD. Okay. Though I don't think that those questions they're looking at those questions. If they're giving them standardized tests, then like the MMPI, the first question on the MMPI is I like mechanics magazines. Now, most people don't have to sit and ponder that too long. Oh, gosh, I looked at one once. Does that mean that I like them?
Is there I've never seen one?
But you only get a yes or a no, right? There's no maybe, I find that I have to read the instructions to people several times before they get it. It's true if it's true or mostly true as it applies to you. It's false if it's mostly not true as it applies to you. But one time, and second question is I have a good appetite. Well, how many? Well, I must have a good appetite. So those questions are not, it gets a little more tricky, in the question. The test was originally written, back in the 40s. So the one question that trips up people a lot is I like playing drop the handkerchief.
Look at Erica's face. Oh,
See?
See, that's how old we are. I know what that means.
I don't, and I'm older than you.
It's a
Well-
game, guys, that you played in elementary school.
I didn't.
Well, there used to be a way of courting was the woman would drop her handkerchief, and the guy would come up and pick it and give it to her. It was a way to introduce oneself. A lot of people today don't understand what the heck that is, right? That's when they leave blank. I got no idea about that one. Okay. So, I mean, there's some old questions in it, but the thing is that they also used the test in World War I and World War II to everybody who went into the military got an MMPI. So when you think about it, the MMPI has been used more than any other test in human existence.
Have they modified it at all to bring it into the vernacular?
Yes, so there's MMPI 1, which is the original one, and then there's the MMPI 2, and of course Pearson needs to come out with a new version so they can sell you more stuff. And so they have an MMPI 3.
Is 3 out?
3 is out, and some people are using it.
Does it still have drop the handkerchief?
No, it doesn't have that in there. I haven't read all the questions in it.
Now it's a video game that you've never heard of.
Yeah. But to give you an example of even people who are psychologists who think they know stuff, I gave the raw data of my MMPI 2 to them, and they took my raw data, which is the answers that the person put. It's just like a Scantron sheet, right? And they went and did an MMPI 3
Off of the email.
and used the same answers that I had for the 2 and put it onto the 3.
Oh, no.
Well, there's 567 questions on an MMPI 2, and it's also on the original one. There's only 335 on the MMPI 3. So I'm picturing this person sitting there going, well, where do I put the other ones?
That extra bonus.
They get an extra bonus one. And the other part is there's 72 different questions on it. You think you're going to get anything close to the same results? No. Okay, but they did, because they don't know what they're doing.
So do you suggest we as lawyers and professionals take the MMPI? I'd like to take it sometime. Where did I get one? I want to take version 2. And I got the question number 1 and 2 down. So.
Okay.
At school, when I went, and Diana too, we went to different schools, but we had to take it to be accepted.
I want to take the test. I want to see what my psychological.
I'll give you one.
Yeah, I guess it was.
Okay.
It was like that we were cognitively okay. I don't know.
I think they were just trying to get data.
Probably.
Because freshman people or new graduate students are the data that most research is done on. So if they decide that that is not a normal sample, all of the data research you've read doesn't mean anything. Okay? When I was at SC, and I was in the graduate program, the freshmen in psychology were the ones that we did all the testing on. They didn't have a choice. That was part of their requirement. They had to take it.
Maybe that's who tested us.
Yeah, so that's where you get all of that data, because where do you find a group of people who are going to do it? Maybe even for $5 they'll do it, right? And so that's how most research is done on. If you're a researcher, there's nobody funding research these days, unless you're in the the designated areas that the government wanted to do that, and with Doge that no longer exists. But so where do you find those people? They're all graduates. They're all students, right? So if somebody comes up with that's not a natural sample of the population, then that means that all the data is really skewed. Okay, so where the heck was I? So I look at the questions
You're
that.
at 10 minutes.
I'm at 10 minutes. Okay. So I'm looking at the questions that people, what strange answers they've come up with. So when you think about that, there are objective tests. There's a couple different kinds of tests. So we'll talk a little bit about those, and then I'll open it up to questions. Is the MMPI, the MCMI are all objective type tests. Okay. And then we have some ones that are projective tests. There's the Rorschach, the TAT, the CAT, the FAT. All those are projective tests. Those are designed to, there's some people, the old psychologists are still doing Rorschachs. Okay?
But isn't there a huge move to not use subjective testing?
There-
That's my understanding.
There's really a large move that all of the evaluators are drying up.
Yeah.
Okay? When I started this, doing evaluations 30 some years ago, and on the LA court site, there was 45 evaluators listed. Right now, there are 15. The problem is that the court, not the court, but the state in their infinite wisdom came up with that if you're going to become an evaluator, you have to have 4 tests. You have to do 4 evaluations that you're supervised doing. Nothing wrong with that, except for the supervisors is the one that's liable for if you do something wrong. Well, it's already litigious enough to write reports, let alone that you're going to have somebody else write reports and you're going to be responsible for them. And your malpractice doesn't cover you when you do that. That's why there's nobody doing it. Now, the other part is that throw in there is that when I first really started doing evaluations back in the 90s, that's when managed care came into existence. If you kind of remember back, some of you, I know that was before your time. And when managed care came in, a lot of the psychologist group all were trying to get out of managed care, so they went over into the family law group and they figured they'd start doing evaluations because they had the skill set to do that, they didn't have the training to do it. And they found out quickly is that I'm not getting the warm fuzzies that I get as being a therapist, that people say nice things about me. These people are saying terrible things about me. Okay? Nowadays, they're even posting it because they got all the ability to do that online, right? So I guess if you read my Yelp review, it must mean I'm doing a good job because I got a lot of people who hate me. Okay.
I wear a witch's hat.
Uh-huh.
You wanna hear ours?
Sure.
25 years ago, I don't remember who I represented the dad, I guess. I don't know if it was minors council. I think maybe it was minors council, I don't remember. But they posted online that Judge Wells and I had an affair when we were in college together.
Oh, nice.
However, I'm many, many years older than he is.
I don't
and
think
he was
that
in
many.
grade school when I was in college.
I don't think that many.
You were in probably middle school when I was in college.
That makes it even worse.
No,
Those
but
relationships are bad. Those relationships.
Well, I have, along that same lines is that in a case that I had, that 2 doctors, one practicing, one decided to stay home and be with the kids. Both kids ended up being somewhat autistic on the spectrum. And the dad liked parlor games. So since he was an anesthesiologist, he'd like to choke people to the point where they'd pass out and then bring them back. Hey, great parlor game, right? Don't you think so? Bring friends over and do this in your living room, right? Maybe not. He also, but he was a really, really good-looking guy, right?
And a great parent, right?
A great parent, according to him. And, he's buff, all this other kind of stuff. And the mom had suffered from post-traumatic brain injury. She got the post-traumatic brain injury from well, kind of that, him beating her head up against the wall while they were having sex. That's a normal thing, right? On the floor, against the wall. And so she had that. He wanted to say it was related to an automobile accident, except for the car wasn't that damaged from the automobile accident for that kind of thing. And she went off and committed suicide because the dad wanted the kids. The dad started this rumor with Minors Counsel because, back to our thing about bias, Minors Counsel was about this tall and about this big, okay? And this guy who's 6'4" is making eyes at her, the anesthesiologist.
Maybe she liked to be choked out.
Maybe. And so he told her that I was sleeping with his wife. I guess during the middle of the evaluation with my secretary in the other room, because I don't see women in my office without my secretary being there. I learned that one a long time ago. Okay? But it happens that and this Minors Counsel, I'm at a meeting and she's telling one of my friends, another attorney, that he's Sharon's sleeping with her. And she looked at him and said, because I'd been down to dinner with them, she goes, "You haven't seen his wife, have you?" She goes, "No." He goes, "She's a knockout. I don't think he's sleeping with that one." So, The use of tests. Sometimes people don't understand psychological testing. You know, they go beyond the limits of the test. They start making all sorts of different exaggerated things, and so they over reliance on that as being the whole part of what the evaluation is about. That's just one of the tools in your quiver, okay? And so you have to be able to understand that's just one of the things you do. So you have to look at what are you testing for, and I look at it is that I'm testing just to find out if they can be effective parents. Okay, I'm not testing to find out, give them a diagnostic code and all that. And you need to be doing testing of both sides, not just one of them. You know, you have to be appropriate. You need to follow the procedures. You know, or the results are not valid.
So one about, I had a case years ago, San Bernardino.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember the 730's name, but did a report, testing.
Uh-huh.
Before completing the report, and before writing the report, decided to retest my client. Didn't mention it in the report. I came out in cross-examination and something. What's up with that? I mean, you don't like a result, so you make the person take the test again? Or do you analyze what they did and say this is what it is?
What did he say was invalid before or something?
I can't recall what it was, but it wasn't mentioned in the report, and my client had been tested and then retested again.
Okay.
So why would you do that?
Well,
Or
Well,
have you done it?
But that was after the report was written.
No, before the report was written, she had my client take the MMPI.
The test a second time.
second time.
But she didn't mention that she'd
That
taken
she
it
did,
twice.
or why, and it came out in cross-examination, I can't remember.
well, one of the things that okay, if you have an invalid report, testing result, you know then it makes sense to retest, do another test. Okay, one of the problems you have to worry about is all the tests, like the MMPI, is not designed to take it every month. Okay, the rules on the MMPI says you should wait at least a year before you do it again. But the manual is something that most people never read. It's like putting together that thing that you got from IKEA that you don't read the directions for. Well, people do the same thing with the MMPI that use it in things, right? So there's no real.
But if you did that, wouldn't you mention that in the report? Wouldn't you say, the test results
Absolutely.
of test number one were invalid for the following reasons, so then I gave the patient another one, and
Yeah.
these are the results, and that's why I'm using the second, I don't know.
That would only make sense. I mean, everything that I do has to. I make it sure it's in my report.
I've seen it one time.
You know, every times if I've had to call them back and talk to them, sometimes I end up having in an evaluation. There's one thing I just doesn't make any sense here. So I will call back a parent and say, "Hey, what about this?"
Right.
That's in my report. It's in my time log of that this is what I did. Because if it's not, then I'm setting up that person who set himself up for some liability in that situation. Okay. What else am I supposed to cover in here? I think that's it. Any questions? So let's open it up for questions.
You know what's interesting, Kim, is that seeing high conflict parents, and I don't do I did some evaluations. Diana did the bulk of them out here, and you. But parents will come in and they say, well, they disparage the other parent, and then they will say, because they believe it's true, I want him to be tested. I want a 730 evaluation, so he's going to be tested. And I say, well, it doesn't work that way. One needs to be order number 2. You're going to be tested. Well, why would I be tested? I'm a good parent. I said, because it has to be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
So they go, oh, maybe it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I try in my reports to make everything balanced. If I spend 10 hours talking to one parent, I'm going to go find 10 hours to talk to that other parent too.
Absolutely.
You know,
Does the court order the 730 evaluations, or any party can?
court orders.
Does court pay for it, or do
No,
the parties have
The-
to pay for it?
it's an interesting scenario. So I am basically hired by the attorneys. I report to the judge only, and I'm paid for by the parents. It's pretty. Where?
So, there was an hour skipped, I see.
Did we?
Yeah, when you look at, I looked at it a while ago, Kim was supposed to be on from 2 to 3, but if you'll notice, there was nothing from 11 to 12. on your,
Don't anyone let me do the numbers next time.
So we're actually running,
Ahead of time?
at this time, we're running ahead of time. Because Mary Jo's supposed to be on at 3.
Yeah, I called and moved, I texted her and moved her to 2,
Mhm.
but she didn't get it.
Ah,
So she told me she's coming at 2:30.
okay.
Or 3 o'clock.
So I got 30 minutes to answer questions.
You got 30 minutes.
Or we can talk about 30 minutes for anything our new minors council wants to talk about.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot, to deal with as minors council. And we've got 3 of you here, and you've been minors council, but family law is kind of different. You know, David actually went up against a minors council in juvenile court one time, because minors council in juvenile court had never even gone out to the home and met his client. Remember that? That was a case in Hemet, I think.
Dale, should I turn the video off?
Yeah, that's fine. Turn the video off. Yeah.